Today's topic that we're going to be learning is our infinite worth. Sometimes we find the infinite value of ourselves within the finite. And that's what we discuss today. God is telling Moses what type of evaluation the priests have to make on the Jewish people when they make a commitment to pledge and give a donation to the temple. So we're in the daily wisdom on the fourth reading, when it's a separate reading, and when the Torah portions of Bahar and Bechakosai are together, this is the Friday reading. So God then instructs Moses regarding the various forms of donations that individuals may make to the temple or to the priests. One type of donation is when someone pledges the monetary value of a person or an article. In such a case, the priest must first assess the pledge's ability to pay before he collects the pledge. So it's a very interesting thing. We spoke about, a day or two ago, we spoke about slaves, which means that they would evaluate a person if the person didn't have the means to repay a loan, or if he stole something, didn't have the ability to pay back what he took. They would evaluate the person's value of his labor, of what he can contribute to a business or to someone's home, and he would become a slave to that person. So what if a creditor receives a slave as the credit to the loan that he lent out, but he doesn't really want this person or doesn't need the person? He just wanted the cash value. So the same way where in modern day today, a person will make a tax-exempt donation. They'll make a donation because they would rather give money to a charitable cause and save money on taxes than take their profits to themselves. In this case, the creditor would prefer to give this donation, the slave as a donation to the temple, and receive the credit that he gave a donation instead of having the person and having to look after another individual. How valuable is this to the temple? So here the Torah tells the priests that it must be evaluated by a public adjuster how much this donation really is. In addition, let's say I tell the temple that I'm going to donate my entire house to the temple. What a great, generous donation. But it may seem like a big donation, but in essence, the bank owns 90% of my home. So can I really give such a donation? So this is the type of evaluations that the priests would do when someone made a pledge to the temple. So we're back inside where the verse says, Al pi asher tasig yad hanoider ya'arichenu hakohen, that the priest must evaluate the pledger in accordance with how much he could afford, which means that he cannot make a donation beyond his means or something that he doesn't have. The pledger's wealth is evaluated based on what he actually possesses, regardless of whether he has chosen to make use of all his wealth or only part of it. God evaluates us in a similar way. All Jews received the entire Torah when our souls stood at Mount Sinai, so the entire Torah is our inheritance and our possession. Therefore, regardless of how much of the Torah we have studied or internalized, God regards us as spiritually wealthy. God's favorable evaluation to our wealth and worth is filtered down into the consciousness of the non-Jewish nations of the world. And this is why non-Jews, whether or not they are conscious of it, have a deep-seated and high regard for the Jewish people. So, of course, we turn the monetary value into a spiritual spin, because the true wealth, like we all know, is not a monetary wealth, but rather a spiritual wealth. God gifted us the Torah. The Torah was given to us, like we say in the verse, Torah tziva lanu Moshe morasha, which means that Moses gave us the Torah they received from God at Mount Sinai as an inheritance. And that's what he's saying here in the verse, that because we inherited it, whether we accepted it or not, it became into our possession. It's just like a child that is born. If he inherits something, it belongs to the child. Whereas if the child does a purchase, not necessarily does it transfer into the child's possession. Or if a person gives a gift to a child, or to anyone for that matter, you have the right to say, I am not accepting this gift. And then the gift does not enter into your responsibility, into your possession. Whereas inheritance, whether you like it or not, it automatically enters into your possession. And that's what he's saying here, that the Torah was a gift to the Jewish people, and therefore we have this inherent value that is an infinite value that we have no matter whether we study it or not, we practice it or not. And he continues, nonetheless, merely possessing inherited spiritual wealth is not enough. We are meant to make use of the Torah's infinite power to refine both ourselves and the world by studying all aspects of it and internalizing it to the best of our ability and beyond. So the point of the Torah is not just that we should have this great gift that sits in a box in the ark in the temple, in the synagogue, but rather it's something that we should internalize. This is where it ends in the book of the Daily Wisdom. Now I want to bridge the gap between the monetary wealth that he's referring to and this spiritual wealth that that it gets translated into. I'm going to use a story to bring out this point. This is a story that I've heard in my childhood from my late father, and he repeated this story quite often. And I think he repeated the story because the lesson that is within the story is very, very powerful. And it's something we always want to remind ourselves of where everything comes from. Also, he witnessed the story when he was in his youth. And when we witness certain memories from our youth, sticks with us for our entire life. And this, I think, is one of those stories that really stuck with my father, and therefore he shared it quite often. For those of you who have come with me to 770, to the Chabad headquarters, to see where it all began and where the Rebbe's main base was, where he worked from, and the synagogue, you can understand the details of the story. For those who weren't there yet, God willing, we should make a trip and visit this, but I'm going to try to give a good description. So the Rebbe's office was right when you walk into 770, into the building, right on the left is the Rebbe's office. So about 6 feet from the front door is the door to the Rebbe's office. Now, if you walk 20 feet further in, there was what we call the Zal, which was like it's the mini synagogue, which people would call the weekday shul. So that's a large room where yeshiva boys would sit and study during the day. This story takes place while my father was in yeshiva, and he was studying in this room that was 20 feet off from the front entrance. So they would often get to hear when there was noise outside the Rebbe's room, if there were people coming with their problems or questions, or if there were well-respected people coming and there was a tumult in the hallway, they would hear and they would go out and see what's going on. So my father says that one day they're in the middle of studying, and all of a sudden they hear this big commotion. They hear a woman crying very loud, and she's trying to catch her breath, and there's an argument going on. The argument is between this woman and the Rebbe's secretary. The woman came running into 770, desperate that she needs to see the Rebbe. The secretary said that the Rebbe was occupied. The Rebbe's busy. The Rebbe's in his room. You can't just go into the Rebbe's room. And she was hysterical. She didn't take no for an answer. Now, the yeshiva boys are in the hallway watching this story play out. And the Rebbe is also in his room, hears a commotion. So the Rebbe opens up his door. So the Rebbe is standing by his door. Door is open. The Rebbe is holding the door open. And this woman starts crying to the Rebbe. What does she say? She says that my husband is a big diamond dealer, and he sends me all the time to transfer diamonds or jewelry from the office to clients, and pick up money from clients, bring it back to the office, go from the office to the bank. That was her position in the company, and apparently she was a very good cover-up. No one would suspect her for carrying much valuables. So she was on the subway on the way home from one of her pickups, and she fell asleep on the train, and she got up for her stop, and the doors opened up. She ran out of the train, and she forgot the bag in the cart. She doesn't know if she forgot the bag or if the bag went missing. She doesn't have the bag, and it was a large sum of money. And this woman cries to the Rebbe and says, I'm scared to go back home because I lost such a large amount of money. I can't even face myself. Forget about facing my husband. What am I to do? So the Rebbe went like this with both hands. The Rebbe looks up, and the Rebbe says, there's a lot more from where that came from. And the woman calmed down and went home and went home. Now, my father described the story how the Rebbe lived with this infinite amount of faith that everything came from Hashem. There was not one detail that didn't come from Hashem. So you losing the money needed to happen. It was what Hashem planned. But you shouldn't worry that you lost money. You worry that you lost, let's say it was $10,000 or whatever, right? Let's say $10,000. You're concerned that you lost that because you think that there's no more from where it came from. You think, okay, God ran out of money. But this story, the Rebbe expresses to this individual that there's a lot more from where it came from. God has an infinite amount. So to connect this story with what we're learning here is that when we're connected to the Torah, to the infinite part of the Torah, to that infinite part of the inheritance of the Torah that we were gifted, then we indeed have an infinite value in our monetary world. Because we're not limited anymore. We're not limited to say, oh, I only closed this amount of deals, or I've only had this many clients this month or this year, and I'm capped and I'm limited at this amount. But rather, we start to put our faith in God instead of in us. Now we realize, wow, I have an infinite amount. It doesn't end. I can go on and on and on. Because when we're connected with God, we're connected with the source, we realize that life is truly infinite, and the monetary stuff that we have is truly infinite. So saying this is a very nice story, but it remains with a little bit of a question mark with why does the priest have to assess the value of the person who made the pledge? That's what the verse tells us here. If the person is giving the money to charity because he believes that there's more money will come, and he can give all his money to charity because more money will come, then it's not really, there's no need for anyone to assess the value of this person. So it's interesting that there were several times when there was a public pledge during the Rebbe's Farbrengens. And one time, I would say 2 or 3 times maybe, it was where when these pledges would happen, the Rebbe looked at pledge cards. This is all in public. The Rebbe would call people out. Some people, the Rebbe would say that they should double, triple, or quadruple whatever they wrote down. And some people, the Rebbe said, less. So we always laugh. There was one case with my great uncle where the Rebbe told him to do 4 times as much as he wrote. And his friend, the Rebbe told him to do half as much as he said. My uncle was a businessman, and this other one was a rabbi. So the Rebbe was expressing that the businessman is the person who needs to have the infinite faith that no matter how much you pledge, Hashem will make sure you can fulfill that pledge. But for the rabbi, what business do you have to start pledging all of these large amounts? That's not your job. Your job is to collect the money. But it's the businessman's job to give the money. Within that, there's a whole long story, not for today. But I just wanted to bring out this point that, yes, the Rebbe was the Kohen, was the priest that was evaluating the pledges that people made. Some people didn't even give enough. Their pledge should have been more. And that was what the Rebbe was bringing out. In that person, you have a greater potential that you don't even see that in yourself. So with this, we understand that it's not just anyone who's a priest is someone that evaluates people. Assess the value of a pledge is not a monetary thing, but rather a spiritual thing by understanding that this and this person's soul has the ability and the potential to bring down these great lights and great charitable things into this world. So with this, I'm going to leave you with these thoughts. It's a lot to think about. And I want to wish everyone a wonderful, wonderful Shabbos. And it should be restful and peaceful. And God willing, we'll see each other again next week.